Welcome to another episode of CannaTalk, and I am your host, Roger Landry, the founder of the Liberty Beacon Project and the managing director, but also the media director for CannaSense Total Wellness. And CannaTalk brings you each week discussions of cannabis. How does it affect you? How will it affect us? The laws, the rights, and the abilities. And all of these things are discussed on a regular basis. Today we have something totally different. Today we have a shoot from the hip discussion with two people that I really enjoy talking to, and you're going to find out why. The first person is a good friend of mine and is also a director in CannaSense Total Wellness. He is the Special Projects Director, and that is Ron Patton. Ron, how are you, sir?
I'm doing quite well, Roger. Thank you for having me on.
Well, you're my co-host, buddy, so start out by telling our audience what you want them to know about you, because you do some good stuff out there on the West Coast.
Well, I'm editor-in-chief of Paranoia Magazine, sort of a conspiracy and paranormal magazine. I'm also executive producer of Ground Zero with Clyde Lewis.
Yes.
It's a nationally syndicated radio show featuring Clyde Lewis, who's had Ground Zero for about 25 years now, and we talk about anything from parapolitics to the paranormal.
Been there, been on the show. Not only that, people, but when you look down below this show, you're going to see a picture of Ron wearing that Paranoia t-shirt.
Yeah, so I'm involved in several different types of multimedia companies and businesses, and it's something that I never really thought I would do. I graduated from college in business administration and was in the hotel business, and then I enjoyed writing, so I happened to pick up a Paranoia magazine back in the 90s, and I go, whoa, this is some crazy stuff. But it's something that wasn't in the mainstream media. There was a lot of really good articles, some fringe stuff, some pretty good investigative journalism pieces. So I said, what the heck? And I was really delving into mind control, especially government CIA mind control, and until then, and all the
Mockingbird drugs. And
yeah. So I just started writing about that and started putting out some articles, and I got to the point back in 2011 where the owner asked if I wanted to take it over, which I did.
Yes.
So I did that for a few years, and that's when Clyde Lewis gave me a call in 2015 and said, hey, you want to be my producer? So I sold the magazine to Olaf Phillips, a good friend of mine, and I'm still involved as editor. But
it's then in magazine.
Really great guy, and has a really big heart. And then in 2016, I talked with Daniel Lewis Crumpton, who he's a writer as well, and I actually met him through Chuck Ocelli,
which I know very well.
Right, yes. Right, and another really excellent human being.
Yes, absolutely.
He has a really good show, The Ocelli Effect, I believe.
Yep.
His own network. And so I met, Daniel, and he was telling me about this new company that he's part of called CannaSense, and he told me about it, and I was I thought, hey, wow, that's great, but no, you can't do that kind of stuff. So, you can't be, sending people cannabis products all over the country.
Okay, but don't get too deep into that, because we're going to bring Joe in, okay?
All righty, sounds great.
Yeah, because we don't want to leave Joe sitting on the outside. You and I, between our experiences, look, for everybody listening, you always hear me talking about 3 generations of perspective, which means at least 60 years. A generation is 20 years. There's going to be 3 people on this call, and one of them, only one of them, doesn't have 3 generations of perspective, and I'm not that person, so you guess now. All right. Our guest, Ron and my guest, is Joe Rupe. He is the host of Lighting the Void, a talk radio show that airs Monday through Friday, 9 p.m. Pacific time to midnight. Joe is also the owner and executive producer of the Fringe FM. Okay, when he's not talking at night about the hidden mysteries of life or producing radio shows or podcasts or whatever, he's spending time with his son Corbin. That is great. Joe is also a caregiver of CannaSense and believes that all questions are doorways and that all beliefs are walls. And yes, they can be. You're right. However, Joe also believes in natural law and is working to promote a society that is conducive to the human spirit. God, I would love to see that too. Check out the network KTLK Digital Broadcasting at the Fringe FM. How are you, Joe?
Man, thank you for being here, letting me be here. I'm with two of my most favorite people on the planet right now, and I say that actually with the most sincerity. And I've met you both pretty recently, and I'm stoked about it. I'm super stoked.
Yeah, well, I've listened to you talk too, and you ain't no slouch. Have I got that right, Ron?
Very much so. Yeah, I
Okay.
met
Yeah.
Joe a few months ago, and it's been a really good relationship.
Let's get this started, okay? And since I'm the host, and then obviously we will go to Mr. Ron, and then we will go to you, our guest, Joe. And for anybody who doesn't know, Joe is pretty damn good. This is a guy who sits up late night. This is the guy that truckers listen to, or the people who just think that sleep is a waste of time and they want to hear somebody who makes sense. This is who they listen to. So when he talks about being with two of his favorite people, we're feeling like we're with one of our favorite people. All right, here we go, Joe. We're going to be talking about cannabis. There's three of us here. We're going to be talking about our individual experiences, what we saw as growing up. When did we realize its usefulness for medicinal purposes, so on and so forth. We're going to talk sociological change from three different perspectives. I'm going to start this off. I was born in 1954, so it's flower power. Okay, this is the dawn of the age of Aquarius, and I could go on, and Ron understands exactly what I'm talking about. And these were peace marches and sit-ins and demonstrating one war, and you had an entire generation who felt it was their duty to rebel against a government they didn't believe in. And one of the ways they rebelled was the use of a substance called pot or ganj, and there were a million different names for it. And they knew that it wasn't a dangerous drug, but they also knew that it made them feel good, and they also knew it pissed off the law. I came from a very conservative family. By the time I was about 15 years old, I probably tried cannabis for my first time. And to tell you the truth, it absolutely blew me away, scared the crap out of me, and probably never would have gone back to it again, except a girl offered it the next time. And if you're a 16-year-old boy and a cute girl offers you something, well, I'm sure both of you guys understand where I'm going with that. But when I turned 17 years old and I graduated from high school right then, just as I turned 17 years old, yes, I went through advanced classes. But here we are. I'm in the age of the Vietnam War. I graduated from high school in 1972. I was going to be drafted. So, being a rather smart individual, but also being from a conservative family, I decided the best way to do this to make everybody happy was to join the Navy in the nuclear submarine fleet. Let me explain something to you. The furthest thing from the battlefield in Vietnam was a nuclear submarine. And it was fairly safe. But it taught me technology beyond belief. And it also kept me away from cannabis. Okay, fast forward. I spent 20 years working for the military industrial complex. Again, cannabis can't be a part of that. They drug test you randomly. 8 years in the military, nuclear submarines. Definitely can't smoke pot on a nuclear submarine. So now I've gone through 30 years of my life without it. Really had no need for it, really had no want for it. Except I had a very good friend. an extremely good friend, who was in the fourth stage of cancer. And I watched her every single day as the chemotherapy beat her further and further into the ground. Chemotherapy has worse than a 90% failure rate. And there are researchers out there, and I can provide the research to show you. I don't challenge you to prove me wrong. I dare you to. There's research out there showing, okay, the failure rate of chemotherapy, absolutely proving it beyond a shadow of a doubt. But yet, proving, and I have actual videos showing cannabis killing cancer cells. The massive research I did because of the influence of watching my friend dying from a process she never should have had to go through if cannabis was legal in this country. What scared the hell out of me and what started me down the path to CannaSense was that I did a little bit more research, and I found out that in the United States, if you want to use naturopathic or homeopathic remedies for cancer, such as cannabis, it's illegal. You need to leave the country. And I'm not talking about you doing it at your home. I'm talking about clinics. Do you know how many homeopathic or naturopathic doctors have suicided themselves? All of a sudden, a massive amount of them decided it would be a good thing to commit suicide. I don't believe that, and I don't think either one of you on this call believe that. So,
Right. I remember that occurring a few
Yep.
years ago. It's going on now.
yeah, and so here we sit. Now you've got my perspective. Now you understand where I am at. Had I not experienced that traumatic situation with a good friend, and I dug my heels in and I started doing massive research, and one of the first things that popped up was the ability of cannabis not only to control,
Mhm.
but to actually defeat cancer. Now, we're talking about something that doesn't beat you into the ground like chemotherapy. We're talking about something that is natural. I'm going to finish this all off with, because I really want you to jump in now, Ron. I want to finish this all off with something that most of you don't understand, and I never, ever lie, and I never exaggerate. Cannabis is not only the perfect medicine for the human body, but the human body has cannabinoidal receptors built into it. Did you hear what I just said? The human body has cannabinoidal receptors literally built into its DNA. Your turn, Ron.
Well, it's interesting you say that because everything has a frequency, right, or resonance. Yep. So that's why probably I would venture to say that cannabinoids just resonate with the human body, and it's able to heal it in so many different ways. Well, yeah.
So how did you get to know? Bring us from a little toddler, Ron.
Oh yeah.
Come on.
Oh yeah. So I remember back around I think it was around 1969. I'm a little younger than you, but not too much younger, Roger.
You're 5 years younger than me. That's more than a little.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, my dad was in the Navy, and at the time we were living in San Diego, specifically Ocean Beach. And I remember walking, I was about 9 or 10. I was walking on the sidewalk, and all of a sudden I saw something on the ground. It looked like a cigarette. And it's like I picked it up and I smelled it and I go, this isn't a cigarette. This is probably marijuana or something, and I was all freaked out, and I ran upstairs and showed it to my dad and mom, and I go, should we call the police? That's just sort of the attitude I had at the time, because that's really bad stuff, because they talk about it on the news all the time, and all these hippies using it. Yep. And so it was just, they just kind of laugh and they go, no, we'll just throw it away. But and one of the reasons why I kind of knew what it was is my dad worked in the legal department in the Navy, and he was actually involved in a lot of drug busts of Navy and Marine personnel.
Was that in
I was
Hawaii or in San Diego?
No, this was actually in San Diego. So he worked in the legal department, and he worked with the DIA and stuff like that on internal drug busts for military personnel. So, I thought, hey, I'm doing a good thing, right? But, I was just sort of like, oh, okay, well, I guess it's no big deal. But little fast forward, my dad retired from the Navy. We moved to Hawaii. And so, as a teenager growing up in the mid 70s, marijuana, or what they referred to as pakalolo.
Yes, pakalolo. Yes.
Yeah, it was very prevalent, and it was ain't no big thing,
Even when I was there, it was. Yeah.
Right. And so people were smoking it all the time and not getting busted. The only time you'd hear about busts were when people were selling it in big quantities.
Yes.
But Hawaii had a very relaxed atmosphere when it came to cannabis. And so I'd partake in it. And but my issue with it at the time was I had a lot of allergies to different things, and one of them was smoking cannabis. So, my eyes would get puffy and I'd feel stupid. And so it was
Wait a minute, that's what everybody feels. Okay, I'm kidding. Joe, you still with us, Joe?
I'm just, at the time, because I didn't know about the different strains of cannabis. And so I just sort of put that on the side for many years, right? It was like, okay, well, this isn't working for me. And then I guess probably give 20 or 30 years later, when I decided, you know what, I'm starting to hear a lot of things, good things about marijuana, and not sort of like the Cheech and Chong movie stereotype of what cannabis has to offer. And I was working with young adults that had autism and other developmental disabilities. I was a job developer helping them attain employment. And I was hearing from parents who were very interested in various types of cannabinoids to kind of help their children out.
Yep.
But again, the way the laws are set up, it was just very difficult. And then, some of these young adults too had epilepsy, and they were given cannabis, CBD, and that's actually the first time I ever heard of CBD. And they were so much better. It was really healing them of a lot of their physical ailments. So I go, wow, there must be something to this. And so I started perusing the internet, checking it out. And I also noticed that you could take cannabis in tea or oils or tinctures. And so I started experimenting with that, and also realized there was a difference between indica and sativa, and they also had hybrids. Mm-hmm. So started trying those to see what would work best for me.
Can I tell you what would work really, really great for you? One of the best strains I've ever tried?
What's that?
Little plug here. The Liberty Beacon strain.
Whoa. Now what is that? Is that a hybrid?
Yes, it is. And it's very potent, and if you're using it for medicinal purposes, it is extremely effective. But if you've got about 10 minutes left, okay, why don't we, I know you're not quite done, wrap this up, turn it over to Joe, sure, because I would like a few minutes of open discussion at the end of this. Please.
Certainly.
You the man.
Certainly. So, like I said, I just started getting back into it, and back in 2015, I have a good friend by the name of Freeman Fly who invited me on this movie premiere bus tour with Dan Fogler.
Ooh.
And the name of the movie that he produced was called Don Peyote. And it was up along the West Coast, and I had no idea what to expect.
Yeah, I can bet.
But basically, it was Freeman and a good friend of mine, Greg Carlwood from the Higher Side Chats, Jamie Hanshaw, and Dan Fogler. And so we went from Hollywood all the way up to Oakland and stopped in Big Sur and some other cities to show the movie. But when we stopped at each location, at each city, there was a dispensary that would come onto the bus and give us, all different kinds of cannabis goodies. And I mean, it was just a mind-blowing experience. And then we ended up. Oh, yeah. Well, the thing is, just because I really don't smoke a lot, I didn't have, after a day or two, I just decided, you know what? I'm just going to inhale that secondhand smoke and I'll be fine. And so
it gets thick enough sometimes. Yeah, it does.
Oh, yeah. And then, then we ended up at the end of the Dan Fogler, Don Peyote bus tour, we ended up at Weed Map's headquarters in Irvine, California. And I was just amazed at the type of production that they had in there in regard to getting information out to the media. And then they also had some really state-of-the-art type of, cannabis products or devices, like these little bongs that look really space age. And they also had a TV production company. And, I just realized that, the cannabis industry is really big and it's going to get a lot bigger. And, the bottom line is this, people take cannabis for different reasons. As I get older, I'm looking at it definitely from a more medicinal perspective, just because, I have some health issues here and there. And so I just want to be really proactive in understanding what are all the different benefits that's going to help me and also help others.
Yep.
So that's my journey. And, like I said, I met Daniel Lewis Crumpton back in 2016. He wanted to come on Ground Zero. We had, so many people wanting to come on board after listening to that show. Yep. And so that was the start of my journey with CannaSense. Actually, it was about 2017. And here I am.
I came
2 years
in right after you did. And here we end up not only with Daniel Lewis Crumpton, who is the PR director, but you are the special projects director. I'm the media director. I would say we've got a pretty good representation of CannaSense here, with one exception. We want to bring in our ultimate caregiver, the guy everybody has been waiting to hear from while Ron and I droned on and on. Just kidding, Ron. Your story was actually great. My point here is, Joe, so sorry, but we both had something to say. How about you?
I don't think anybody really, anybody from my generation does not want to hear what I have to say.
I know.
I could listen to you guys tell stories all day long.
Say it.
All day
Say
long.
It, Joe.
But I will say it, though. So I grew up as a kid with two sides to my family. One side had a pretty rough and rowdy history, and my father's side was a little different. So we had severe alcoholism in my mother's side, which ended up, killing my mother when I was 13. But I was always taught that this stuff is the same. It's the same. It's dope. It was called all these different names, and I was not to mess with it. It was my father's, that whole story. Long story short, as I grew older, my cousin introduced me to it when I was about 14 or 15. And to this day, he still feels bad about it. And I thank him for it on a daily basis when I get a chance to, because it opened my life up to a lot of different things. Number one, to realize that a lot of things I was told didn't really add up. And I grew up kind of a nervous, shy kid, believe it or not. Nervous, shy, afraid to say things.
No, don't believe it.
And my first, I really did. But my first experience with it was the biggest time. Once I started having realizations that there was more to this, okay, it was in high school when a friend of mine, after school, we all would save our lunch money, right, in high school. $5 here, $5 there. After school, head down to get it wherever we got it from. And I remember the first time that I opened up and told how I felt about something. Now, this is where the creativity thing came in, to where I realized this was a natural thing. And I jammed on and on for 30 minutes, and I forget what I told the story about. I think it had something to do with my brother. And there were crickets after I stopped talking. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've been talking for 30 minutes, right? And everybody's sitting there, and they're like, just with their mouth open looking at me. And I was like, what did I said something stupid. I'm sorry, y'all. And they were like, no. They were like, please keep talking. Tell me more. And I never opened up like this. And so that's when I started realizing there was something natural about it. And I started getting these bad earaches too. And I was prone to not going home because my household was very strict. So I was always a long ways away and in pain. And what could I do? Well, that's all I could do. And it had an unbelievable amount of relief for me. More and more things started happening as I got older, where I realized that everything I've ever been told about this is BS. And not only that, it comes straight from the earth. I mean, it's straight from the earth. The only problem that I had you'd meet a friend and they'd bring some, and it would be way too much of something for me. And then another one would be perfect. And we would jam on and say, this is ridiculous that we don't have the option to choose what strand we want that helps us. Right. And then my ultimate realization is when my grandmother died from cancer, who was my only mother. It killed me. And it made me look into this whole chemo thing. And in the late 90s, the doctors were getting kickbacks for giving out chemo. And I'm not talking about a little bitty money. I'm talking about
Hold on
bucks.
1 second. Not
Kickbacks
only were they getting kickbacks, but you have to understand, in this country, and this is the reason why so many of these naturopathic doctors are disappearing. In this country, okay, if you are diagnosed with cancer, you immediately, and either one of you speak up if you think I'm getting this wrong, you are immediately worth between $350,000 and $500,000 to Big Pharma. That's the cost of chemo over a couple of years, which will kill you.
Absolutely.
All right, I apologize. Please continue. Thought that was important.
Well, it is. And I was never quote conspiracy guy, right, or whatever, but when I looked into that, I was like, there is something incredibly wrong with this. Now, I eventually, because I couldn't figure out which strains that I could tolerate and the other ones that just, you know what I mean, some things just help you and other things you don't do so well with, right? So I make it a point now that I look for certain types of strains, which I shouldn't have to. I should be able to get them when I want. And I make sure, for the health benefits alone, that I have that in my system. I don't go too long without having it in my system. I'm not a daily partaker, but I don't like going too long without it because the health benefits are just so immaculate. And now all I want to do is promote this CannaSense thing, and as a radio producer, and I'll tell everybody here, people always ask me, man, you've been in radio for only 2 years and you got all these listeners now. How did you, it takes about 4 years to even get something going like that. Because I knew that Ron Patton was somebody cool because I knew that he understood these things. I hit him up blindly and said, hey, I'd like to have a chat with you about some of this production stuff because you're actually a producer for one of my favorite shows. And inherently, I knew, it's hard to say, in my soul that this guy was going to say, no problem.
Are you blushing,
You don't
Ron?
get that with.
Oh,
Good.
yeah.
But he did, and he took his time, and he talked to me about it, and he talked to me about CannaSense, and I heard the passion in it. And he said, we're all getting behind this thing.
Yep.
Would you be interested? And I said, I was interested a long time ago. Absolutely.
All right, look.
That's my long story short.
You both did a great job. Let me cap this off with something I didn't explain to you guys. Is what does cannabis do for me today? That's the part of the story nobody's heard. Ron has heard it. Ron and I have been talking about these things for a couple of years, but nobody else has. If you stop to consider that I was in one auto accident and dumped a motorcycle 3 times on the back hill roads of Arkansas. Yeah, I live in the Ozarks in Arkansas. Coming around the hill on a bend on a hill in the Ozarks. If you're on a motorcycle, yeah, you're probably not going to survive very long. So you dump the bike, and you dump the bike to the right-hand side each time just so that you won't slide off a cliff. Anyway, so we've got 1 car accident, 3 motorcycle accidents, all to the same side of the body. The joints on that side of the body have been killing me. What did they offer me initially? They offered me opioids. And guess what? They worked great, and my productivity fell by almost 30% in the first week alone. All right, nix that shit. Along comes CannaSense. Okay? What is cannabis doing for me today? If I take the consumables, and I'm not talking about the smokables, if I take the consumables, it controls the joint pain and allows me to work. Since I started on the consumables, the edibles, my productivity is back up to where it used to be. One other thing, and this is the big thing, and you've heard both Joe and Ron mention this. I run a global network. Y'all know that. And I run it on $0, which means nobody can tell us what to do because nobody's paying us to do anything. And yes, we've got a bunch of websites scattered all across the planet, but we have to struggle every day to figure out how to accomplish things that media organizations out there with millions or billions of dollars do every day, and we don't have any money. That's a stress point. Am I complaining? No. I did this to myself. I'm here because I want to be. But could I use some stress alleviation? I'll tell you what. I mentioned the Liberty Beacon, which is a new strain. It actually is. The Liberty Beacon is a strain. Couple of puffs off of that. You want to talk about stress relief? I'm not talking about getting stoned. Don't have time for that. Not very often, believe me. But a couple of puffs of this medicinal flower, and my stress melts away and I can go back to being productive again. What this has given me back is the ability to continue to grow the Liberty Beacon Project. Whereas for the last couple of years before I met the likes of Ron and Joe and all of the other great people like Daniel Lewis Grumpton, I was struggling just to get anything done. Look, Ron, I really appreciate you being here. And Joe, I really appreciate you being here. We constantly give facts. We constantly tell people the good things, the bad things. What we don't tell people is that we're human too, and there was a reason we got here. And thank you for sharing those reasons. Ron, any last minute additions here, please? Want to drop any links, please?
Well, my adventures with CannaSense is getting bigger and better day by day, and we have so much to look forward to with CannaSense, and then just individually the relationships that we build with the people that we know involved in the collective is great. And I think one of the biggest things is to hear their testimonials.
Yes.
And how much, like we've all talked about it today, and especially like what you've gone through, Roger. I didn't know the scope of all the ailments that you've had to endure over the past few years. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, look, This is what it's all about. We don't have a teaching degree. None of us, well, some of us maybe, but not the vast majority of us. How do we teach? We teach by wisdom. What is wisdom? It is the accumulation of knowledge through having done things. And you and I have 3 generations. Okay, I just spilled the beans. Ron, you and I have 3 generations of perspective.
There you go. Yes,
Joe,
we
any
do.
final words from you, my friend? Please.
Well, anything other than please, look into CannaSense if you're thinking about taking your health matters and your stress matters and then your own life in your own hands and to empower your life in ways that nobody can offer you. That's what I'm behind. And CannaSense is a part of that, the human spirit. And as a caregiver, if you don't know what to do or you just got a ton of questions, how is this even possible? You can always email me at producer@thefringe.fm. I'll help you along with the process. You can message me. Please hit me
Yes.
up and I will help you.
I will have links to Ron. I will have links to you. And I will have links for the CannaSense Board Fund as well. So people can literally enjoy the hell out of all the information we offer. And I've got to explain something to you. We offer a lot of information. What we're doing, and I think both of both of the people who joined me today will agree with this. What we're doing is not something that's done every single day. The more you know, the more you understand, the more this is workable. Thank you again, Ron. Thank you again, Joe. You guys are absolutely great. Thanks for putting up with me. You both know I have diarrhea of the mouth, but usually I have things to say that make sense.
Thanks
Thanks
for
for
having me.
having us.
All right. Y'all have a great night. And, well, thank you all for watching. This has been another episode of CannaTalk, brought to you by CannaSense Total Wellness in partnership with the Liberty Beacon Project and with 2 of my favorite people. And that would be, of course, Joe Rupe and Ron Patton. Y'all have a great night.